Hello, everyone. How y'all doing? Hey. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you to Karen. Thank you to all the team for bringing me here today. And I'm going to talk to you today about human-centered design. Human-centered data, how do we bring that all together to create products and services that people love? And I have loved hearing so much about Umbraco today. And I know that your mission, your focus on community, also ties into human-centered data and how do we bring that to more people? How do we bring more services to the people and make sure that what they need is in the products and in the services? So a little bit about me. I have worked in product, user experience, research, and design for past decade plus. I'm also an O'Reilly writer as well, writing about user experience, product design. How do we make products and services that people enjoy using and alleviate their pain and their frustration with those products? And I also teach through LinkedIn Learning. So teaching about how do we pull in data analytics, product research, product design to make products that people love, people use, keep them coming back for more. So questions for you. Is your data human-centered? What story does your data tell? Are you using quantitative data on a regular basis to make decisions? Are you incorporating that qualitative data, listening to people, asking their perspective on what works well, what needs to be improved? Think about that impact. Some of the things that I heard earlier today about your users, the editors, the developers, the business leaders. How does what they need today show up in your product? Is it easy for them to find those hitless APIs and make those connections, or are they struggling at points? Is it hard for your developers to get started? Do they need more templates? Do they need more help real time? I love the emphasis on community that I hear you keep talking about, that user experience, that customer experience. How do you make sure that you have a healthy community, an inclusive community, engaging? How do you get people to care? How do you make sure that you are giving them what they need when they need it? And then how do you use that data for solving their problems, making an impact, and showing up as an empathetic market leader? Human-centered design. This is definitely something that can help address some of those ideas that come up as to how do we build the right products? How do we make sure that people find what they need? How do we make sure that we are growing with our audience, that we are catching up to them, that we are leading them on the path that they want to be on, that we're helping them accomplish their goals? Human-centered design talks about ways to help people solve their problems and keeping them in the forefront. Those customer touch points, those potential customer touch points, the people who are not your customers. Why are they not your customer? Engaging with your customers and potential customers, having those conversations, understanding who they are, what matters to them, what drives them, what the motivations are, and bringing that into the work that you do on a daily basis. 4 principles of human-centered design: keeping the people first. Gotta do that. And sometimes in tech, we focus on the algorithms, we focus on the infrastructure. So important. Room of developers, you know, that's very important. But remember, who are we building this for? What problems are we helping them solve? Do we help them reduce time on their tasks so that they can go off and go on vacation and not have to think about work the whole time? Think about what the end point is here. Are we helping people solve the right problem? Thinking about it from a holistic standpoint, not just small features, but the overarching, how do we help with increasing our user adoption? How do we help with onboarding, for example? And understanding that everything is a system. Everything is designed to be a holistic system. How do we think about that from a big picture? And starting with small and simple interventions, incremental changes over time. Inclusive design also helps us think about growing and scaling and creating products and services that meet a global market. And that takes into accountability, diversity, diverse perspectives, backgrounds, education, income levels, race, gender, et cetera. That influences how we approach products and services. How do we feel about belonging? Who's part of this community and who isn't, based upon representation? What do we see? What do we hear? Who do we hear it from? Who are our thought leaders? Definitely things to consider as we continue to grow and build. So some things for you to all consider as you're continuing to grow and build, and I'm seeing some of this already in the talks that I've listened to today. Those usability metrics, time on task, how long does it take your developers to get started and get things done? Qualitative goals, working with your teams, creating those goals around that customer satisfaction. Net promoter scores up. I heard that earlier today. That's a huge win. So continuing to take those notes of what's working well, what needs to be improved, and continuing to grow each year. Thinking about quantitative goals as well. Those particular metrics about who stays. How do you renew your customers? Who's staying as a customer over time and who's leaving? Why are they leaving? Are you following up and making sure to do those exit interviews? Nielsen Norman also has some great usability metrics as well, so definitely check that out. Something to also consider is accessibility. So we talk about WCAG compliance, A, AA, AAA. Are there checks on the accessibility of the dev portals and the documentation that you have today? Where does that stand in compliance? WCAG has some guidelines there as well. You can check that out. And inclusion. Inclusion brings in a lot of different perspectives. So the way that you have recruiting for research and also bringing in those diverse perspectives when you're collecting data help drive inclusive design practices. There's also an inclusive tech glossary that lists terms that show up sometimes in tech and in code bases that are harmful, outdated terms, and there's some alternatives that are more equitable and more inclusive. So definitely check that out. That's a resource that me and my team at Nerdy Diva have provided that's on GitHub. Some things to consider, so think about creating more human-centered design practices, bringing in human-centered data, is identifying barriers that people may have to ease of use, usability, accessibility, and inclusion. Definitely doing your homework, coming to talks like this, learning more about usability, accessibility, and inclusion standards, great step. Creating those goals, creating opportunities for measuring what your usability goals and accessibility goals and inclusion goals are. That's another way for you to hold yourselves accountable. And then sharing that knowledge. One-on-one meetings, group meetings, anywhere, everywhere it comes up. Aligning with those business strategic goals that you have as an organization that cares about community, that cares about inclusion and diversity, practicing what you preach. I love hearing that as part of your mission. Love hearing that part of the culture of Umbraco. So embracing that every day and advocating for change. Some things that really stand out to me is using product usage analytics as a key way to understand how do people actually use your product today? What's helpful? Where do they struggle? Where do they drop off? Where do they have issues? There's some great advantages for using product usage analytics, showing a few here. But the idea of replaying that user behavior, getting that data from real time, and also using that as a way to help make decisions about where to focus your priorities. There's so much that you can improve. Everything gets broken at some point. How do you focus on what to do next? Understanding those product usage analytics can also bring in some perspective on what do people want most? What do people need most? And being able to service them in that way. And identifying those patterns and prioritizing your work helps when you actually have some data to back it up. And that can also increase your buy-in and your support for initiatives and gathering people around a cause and a mission to get things done. There's some tools that I use that I find really helpful. So Pendo is a great tool where you can capture product analytics, run reports, and share real-time support guides in the product as well. Just an example of a tool that I use, and there's many tools like it on the market as well. Some key features of Pendo include being able to tag pages to see how customers use your product, running reports and metrics for product usage, being able to see a funnel, so seeing where they drop off during that funnel, and being able to create support and guides in the product as well. Another tool that I love to use is Heap. So Heap has some real-time analytics where you can see session replays. Another great tool for capturing that data and being able to make sense of what's happening online. And that can drive your decision-making process. That can help you put the data to what you're doing next for your roadmap. I love seeing the roadmap that you all created and being able to have the metrics and the analytics that drive into that definitely has an additional impact. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about applying human-centered design practices to design and to development. So some things that come up is, how do you know where to focus? How do you know what comes next? So definitely those engaging conversations with your cross-team partners and product. Your solution engineers have great insight into your customers, marketing and sales as well, having that cross-team collaboration, benchmarking your competitors. One of the questions that came in earlier from the virtual audience was around WordPress. And someone on the panel mentioned, oh, that's not one of our competitors. But that's a great question, because why isn't that one of your competitors? So focusing on why does some of the user base see WordPress and see Umbraco in the same umbrella, but others do not. So thinking about that in fresh and different ways. Thinking about support tickets that come in as well. There's a lot of frustration when people have something that they expect to work, but it's not working correctly, or it's not working as they thought it would work, and being able to see that as an opportunity, as a way to connect with someone who is struggling, who's frustrated, who has these emotions, who wants this product to work, but something is in the way. Taking that and seeing if there's patterns or the trends or the opportunities to prioritize workflows here to support their needs and help them get unstuck. And reviewing those field marketing reports that come in. And going to your conferences and trade shows like this one and being able to connect with other people in your industry and analogous to your industry, gaining some more information to help think about the future. Sample target goals continue to be that community health, building trust and safety, user adoption, and creating a more inclusive space where there's more multicultural, diverse creators as well. And I love sharing this quote from Antoinette Carroll that talks about, like all systems of oppression, inequality, and inequity are by design. Therefore, they too can be redesigned. So we think about that. When we think about things that happen in the tech industry, I have a few case studies here. One is marketing demographics. Sometimes we go to the same group of people and ask the same questions and get the same answers. But the idea of making sure to have a diverse sampling of participants when we're conducting market research, when we're conducting research on our customers and our clients. And it's an example of allocative harm. We also see things with the language that comes up in coding practices. When we talk about relationships and dependencies, we see master-slave, outdated, harmful language. And there's alternatives that work much better in describing the relationship between different systems and tools. Lead, follow, primary, secondary, for example, are other alternative terms that can be used. And that's an example of representative harm when it's used in that way. And these are from some of the examples we see in different code bases where this lives today. You're probably wondering, what's representative harm? What's allocative harm? So representative harm occurs when systems reinforce subordination of some groups along the lines of identity. So thinking about stereotypes and reinforcing those stereotypes. Allocative harm takes away or withholds certain opportunities or resources. Like if you have like a credit card company, that the way that it's programmed to operate increases the line of credit for male candidates who apply for a credit card versus female. That's an example of allocative harm. Great resource for you all to check out, Algorithms of Oppression, has more information about that. Some other terms in tech that I've seen in code bases: blacklists, whitelists. Just things for us to consider, to think about as we create our systems, as we create dev portals and documentation, the language that we use. What are we portraying to the public eye? Alternatives to blacklists and whitelists: access lists, deny lists, open lists, closed lists, lots of different terms. Block lists, for example. And this is another one from Tesla. Discrimination lawsuits. So this is in the workplace. Hostile work environment. Some allocative harm, so some people are not getting access to opportunities and promotions. Some representative harm. Some people are being seen as stereotypical and just put into a box. So thinking about that as we continue to grow and build our teams. Who feels safety? Who feels included? Who feels a sense of belonging and has access to opportunities? All right, questions for you. How can you add more human-centered data practices? You can go to menti.com and add in the code here. You can start adding in your ideas. Okay, and I'll give you a few minutes to do that. You can switch over to Menti as well. We'll start seeing the comments as they come in. Oh, if you need the code, it's menti.com, and the code is down here, 5264-5784. All right, strategic planning, yeah. Okay, so you can continue to add in your ideas here, and we'll come back to that. Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide. Yep, diverse focus groups, color contrast, collaborative brainstorming, yeah. Regional languages, yeah. Colloquialism, definitely. Question the data source, yeah. Ooh, that's a good one. Very good. Okay, we'll move on. You can keep adding here too. All right, so I'm going to share some more human-centered data practices to consider. Love to see that you all are already doing a lot of this, but just think of this as continuing to grow and expand. Inclusive research. That's something where we're interviewing, we're testing with diverse developers and clients and consumers, asking about their needs, asking about what works well for them, what they're not seeing that they wish that they saw. Like, what are the needs for people with disabilities? What are the needs for them as they're using different tools and different platforms? Someone mentioned color contrast in our word cloud. How do we address that today? Sharing knowledge with diverse communities, be it Twitter, Twitch, Slack, Discord. Where are the people? Where are they? We're talking about expanding in the US, talking about brand awareness. How do we do that? How do we meet people where they are and make sure they hear what you're saying and they know that you want them in the community. You want them to be a part of your community. Thinking about inclusive language, running that current state analysis. What do you have today? Is there any harmful language in those code bases? Is there anything that could be more appealing? Someone mentioned regional languages, colloquialism, as a way to bring more people into the community? Or the things that you can find today that could use some tweaking, could be improved? This is an example of a list of some of the harmful terms that I've collected from the tech world and some of those alternatives. Happy to share this with anybody who wants to see this as well. Something to think about and consider. And thinking about, where do these terms come from? How did we get here? What's the cultural, contextual relevance here? Adding in the information. Sometimes we forget. Other things to consider: creating inclusive style guides, using the language, diverse representation, accessibility best practices. These are some examples. They're on GitHub. Also thinking about inclusive dev portals, so sharing the information, online training, another big piece of growing the brand and growing the community. How does that relate to the communities at large? Do they see themselves represented? Are they seeing themselves in that community as well? And documentation. So again, thinking about the representations and accessibility in the language and who's sharing the information. Are we having diverse voices in that conversation? And getting that out to organizations like Afrotech, National Society of Black Engineers, Society of Women Engineers, to name a few. Getting that information out to the people. So that's a lot of the content I have in this short amount of time. Please also go to the retro here. So what from this talk resonated with you, made sense, was like, oh yeah. What in this talk do you think could have been better? I appreciate that feedback. What I say to anyone who is doing usability testing with me, not testing you, we're testing the software. And again, with this talk, I won't take it personal. I just want this talk to continue to get around and have it resonate with people in a real way. So definitely would love to hear that feedback. And any questions that you may have, definitely add those as well. So you can scan the QR code and add it to the session, and we will see that also. Okay, you can click over to Menti. And that is all I have for you today. Thank you.